The sun was sinking into the red horizon, throwing long shadows that bent like iron bars across the land. Heat shimmered above the earth, and the dust rose in lazy spirals as a single rider cut his way toward the outpost at Fremantle. His hat brim carried the weight of long miles. Sweat had darkened the leather strap under his chin, and the rifle across his saddle seemed less an object than an extension of his arm. His silence rode with him, deeper than the desert, older than the bones scattered across the flats. The settlement unfolded like a wound against the vastness. Rough huts, sagging roofs, the stench of sea rot, and cattle dung drifting through the air. It was a place born of hunger, where men came to take or to lose, but never to stay. A rusted sign groaned above the saloon door. Outside, a drunk lay face down in the dust, one boot missing, flies working his skin. As the rider tied his horse, a wanted poster slapped against a post in the evening wind. The face on the parchment was unfamiliar to him. A gaunt figure accused of bushranging, but the price of his capture made clear what the land valued most: coin. The rider's eyes lingered, not on the man, but on the bold black number inked at the bottom. Then he pushed through the saloon doors. Inside, lamplight burned low, spilling across card tables sticky with beer. Men hunched close, their whispers thick with deceit, dice clattering like bones in a grave. A woman in a torn red dress leaned against the piano, eyes hollow as the smoke curling above her head. The rider crossed the floor slow, steady, drawing a hush without meaning to. He moved with a certainty that made men glance away. He ordered whiskey, the glass cloudy, the taste worse. At the table near him, voices rose. A dispute over cards. One man swearing the deal was foul, another insisting luck was his by right. Chairs scraped, fists clenched. Then steel flashed, a knife glinting in lamplight. The rider's hand drifted near his hip, but he did not reach for iron. Instead, he shifted his weight, nudging the table leg with the toe of his boot. The card scattered to the floor, the knife hand stilled, and in the silence that followed, every eye flicked to the stranger. He said nothing, only sipped his whiskey. The insult was subtle, but it stung. The card players, rough men with scarred knuckles and thin tempers, stood slow. One spat in the dust near his boots. Another smirked, trying to measure him. Then the saloon doors creaked again. 3 men entered, boots too polished for this place, coats heavy with coin and cruelty. They belonged to someone of power. The air itself seemed to admit it. They took stock of the room, and their gazes locked on the rider. One of them, tall with a gold tooth, tilted his hat. "You're the one fresh off the horse," he said, voice carrying a challenge. "Baron's been expecting you." The rider did not answer. He drained the glass and set it down with care. The tall one pressed. He don't like to be kept waiting. His hand hovered near his belt. The room tensed. The rider moved faster than the eye could follow, not drawing steel, but flicking the empty glass. It struck the gold-toothed man square on the chest, shattering, spraying whiskey in shards. By the time the man blinked, the stranger was already standing, rifle lifted from its rest as though it had grown there. Not aimed, not yet, but ready. The message was received. The polished boots backed off with mutters, fury burning under their skin. They would not forget the humiliation, and the room knew it. Word traveled fast. Before night had fallen, a messenger approached the stranger outside, the kind of boy pressed into service by fear. "The Baron wishes to see you," the boy said, eyes on the dirt. The stranger mounted his horse without reply. They rode through the outskirts, the sea's breath falling behind, into country that shifted from ragged scrub to manicured cruelty. The Baron's ranch loomed ahead, more fortress than homestead. Cattle skulls crowned the fence posts, each hollow eye socket a warning. Aboriginal servants worked the grounds under chains in silence, their backs marked by lash scars. The house itself stood proud, a 2-story structure of imported timber, curtains fluttering like banners of conquest. Inside, the Baron waited. He was a man carved by wealth, his coat velvet, his cane silver-tipped, his gaze sharp as cut glass. He welcomed the stranger with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "You ride well," he said, voice smooth, each word measured. "A man who rides well can be of use in this land. But a man who shoots well, that's worth more than his weight in gold." The stranger said nothing. though the Baron's words pressed like a hand against his chest. The Baron circled him, appraising, like one might study a thoroughbred. They're pests on my land. They steal what isn't theirs, disturb the order I built. I'll pay you handsomely to see them gone. The weight of his meaning was clear. The stranger's eyes narrowed, but his face revealed nothing. The Baron smiled wider, as though silence was agreement. Gold was promised, more than most men would ever touch. The Baron waved a servant forward. A pouch placed on the table with a metallic thud. He leaned on his cane, voice low now, venom sheathed but present. Do this, and you'll never want again. The stranger's hand brushed the rifle at his side. He nodded once, neither refusal nor embrace, but something in between. The Baron mistook it for consent, and satisfaction gleamed in his expression. That night, under a sky spattered with stars, the stranger built a small fire at the edge of the wilderness. His horse grazed nearby, restless in the dark. He held the pouch of gold in his hands, weighing it, listening to its promise. Then he set it down beside the flames and stared long into the distance. His thoughts rose like smoke. Gold had its shine, but men always forgot its weight, forgotten the screams it purchased, the graves it left unmarked. He knew what the Baron wanted. He knew what the land demanded in return. The fire burned low. Somewhere in the dark, a night bird called, lonely as a widow. The stranger lifted his rifle, checked its chamber, and laid it across his knees. His eyes closed, not in rest, but in the stillness before a storm. Morning would bring the true measure of the bargain. The morning broke with a sky the color of hammered steel, the heat already rising from the red earth. The stranger rode out from a Baron's compound, his horse steady, his rifle balanced across the saddle horn. Beside him moved four of the Baron's hired men, their laughter coarse, the clink of spurs sharp in the silence. Two aboriginal trackers led the way, lean figures who walked with quiet steps, their eyes searching the horizon for signs invisible to anyone else. The land stretched endless and merciless. Ghost gums rose like white bones from the soil, their shadows thin and crooked. Crows wheeled above, their cries carrying like warnings. The stranger kept his eyes forward, his silence a shield against the men around him. They talked of the gold they'd spend, of women, of drink, and none of them thought to lower their voices. Greed made men deaf. By midday, they reached a dry waterhole, its cracked bed littered with the bones of cattle that had died waiting for rain. The men lounged in the shade of their horses, uncorking bottles and laughing at nothing. The stranger squatted apart, his gaze fixed on the trackers. The older of the two crouched low, pressing his ear to ground, then rose and spoke in words the hired men did not understand. Their leader barked at him impatiently until the younger tracker translated. There were families nearby, not cattle thieves, not raiders. Families. The laughter stilled. One of the men spat. Then we're in the right place. He checked the sights of his rifle, eager. Another pulled a cartridge from his belt with a grin. The stranger's jaw tightened. Families. That was the word. He looked at the men around him and saw no hesitation, no flicker of doubt. For them, it was work. For the Baron, it was control. When the order was given, the men mounted, rifles drawn, moving toward the low rise where smoke from campfires curled faintly against the sky. The stranger stayed where he was. His silence made one of the men turn back. What's the matter with you? Baron's gold too heavy for your pockets already. The others laughed, but their laughter carried a tremor now. The stranger swung into his saddle at last, his rifle resting easy in his grip. His face showed nothing, but his eyes were cold, measuring each of them as if already deciding where they would fall. The camp came into view, a scattering of huts made from bark and branches, children darting between them, women tending to fires, innocence set against the hard cruelty of rifles. The hired men urged their horses forward, guns raised. The trackers slowed, their faces carved from stone, unwilling to lead further into betrayal. The first shot cracked, sharp as lightning. The stranger's rifle spoke in the same breath, but not at the camp. His bullet struck the shooter clean to the chest, knocking him back in the saddle before he tumbled into the dust. The horses screamed, the air filled with confusion, men shouting, unsure who the enemy was. Then the stranger fired again, and another fell. The fight was over before it began. His aim was unerring. Each shot a hammer strike. Dust swallowed the fallen. The survivors fled, spurring their horses in panic. Only silence remained, broken by the echo rolling across the plains. The families in the camp had scattered to cover, fear written in every face. The trackers stood still, their eyes fixed on the stranger with something like recognition. He lowered his rifle slowly, breathing steady. He had made his choice, and it could not be undone. He dismounted, leaving the rifle slung across his shoulder, and approached the camp with empty hands raised. The people watched him with suspicion, mothers clutching children close, elders standing like trees rooted in defiance. He did not speak. Words were brittle things here. Instead, he bowed his head once, a gesture of respect, and stepped back. That night, the survivors gathered by fire. The trackers remained close to the stranger, silent companions in a silence that was no longer empty but shared. They passed him a piece of roasted meat without ceremony, and he accepted, eating slowly, his eyes never leaving the flames. The older tracker studied him, then drew from his belt a carved spear tip, worn smooth from years. He placed it in the stranger's hand. It was not a gift but an acknowledgement. The stranger turned the piece over in his palm, feeling its weight. In it he saw something older than gold, something the Baron could never own. He closed his fingers around it, a promise forming unspoken. The fire crackled, sparks drifting upward into the vast night. Above, the Southern Cross burned sharp against the dark, eternal, watching. The stranger leaned back, listening to the quiet. He thought of the Baron's words, of the pouch of gold waiting in his saddlebag. The shine of it was nothing now, only a shadow of what men chose to forget. Sleep did not come. His mind turned to the men who had fled, their panic a certainty that word would reach the Baron before long. The Baron would not forgive betrayal, and he had the power to send more men, more guns, more cruelty. The stranger had crossed a line, and there would be no return. Yet in the stillness, with the carved spear tip warm in his hand, he felt no regret. At dawn, the trackers moved silently, ready to guide again. The camp had vanished into the land, as if it had never been there. Only the stranger, the trackers, and the endless red earth remained. The road ahead would not be easy. He knew the Baron would not rest until he had crushed this defiance. But for the first time since he had ridden into Fremantle, the stranger felt a clarity as sharp as a knife. The land had chosen its side, and so had he. The sun bled across the ridges when the stranger rode back toward the outpost, his horse's hooves muffled in the dust. The trackers moved with him, their silence heavy but unbroken, the carved spear tip resting in his pocket like a reminder of the choice already carved into his fate. Behind them, the plains were still, but the stranger knew the silence would not last. Men had fled, and men carried tales faster than bullets. By the time they reached the first cluster of huts near Fremantle, whispers had already seeded the air. Children darted to doorways, watching the horsemen with wide eyes. Women pulled them back, as if the sight alone might invite danger. The stranger dismounted at the saloon's edge, and the weight of every gaze followed him. He had arrived as an outsider. Now he was something else, feared, whispered about, and wanted. Inside, the saloon smelled of sour beer and wood smoke. The piano stood silent. Conversations hushed when he entered. A new poster clung to the wall near the bar, ink still wet, the face a stark likeness of his own. The numbers below it had doubled from the last he had seen. The bounty was no longer a warning. It was a hunt. He ordered whiskey, but the barkeep's hands trembled pouring it. No one dared speak to him, but no one dared ignore him either. He drank in silence, the burn of it anchoring his thoughts. The Baron's reach was long, his goal deeper than the sea. And this was only the beginning. When he stepped back into the open air, he felt it before he saw it. The tension humming like a bowstring. Dust rose from the canyon's mouth beyond town. Men were waiting. The trackers had already turned their eyes to the horizon, shoulders taut, nostrils flaring like hounds catching the scent of blood. The ambush came with the suddenness of thunder. Rifles cracked from high ground, the air splitting with the roar of dynamite. Rock and earth tore loose from the cliffs, raining down in a storm of jagged shards. Horses screamed. One of the trackers dragged down in the chaos, his body breaking under the avalanche. The stranger dug behind stone, rifle to his shoulder in a breath, eyes narrowing to slits of calm amid ruin. He answered the thunder with precision. His first shot cut down a man silhouetted against the rim of the canyon, the body crumpling like a rag doll. His second tore the rifle from another's hands, sending him scrambling. The air filled with dust and screams, every sound stretched long, as though the earth itself slowed to witness. The fight dragged, brutal and short. When the smoke thinned, silence remained, broken only by the groan of the dying and the sharp breath of the living. The stranger stood, dust in his beard, blood spattered across his sleeve. He turned to the trackers. One had fallen. The other crouched near the body, his face carved in grief that spoke without language. The stranger knelt beside them, touched the dead man's chest, and bowed his head. No words passed, only the bond of men who had shared firelight. They moved on before night closed the canyon, weary and grim, following a path the Baron's men had not hidden well. Tracks in the dust led to a narrow cleft where stones swallowed sunlight. The stranger knew this was no simple trail. It was meant to conceal. They entered the canyon as shadows lengthened. The air grew colder, the walls high and unforgiving. Then the space widened, and there it was, the Baron's hoard. Stacks of crates, sacks heavy with gold, guarded not by men now but by silence. The stranger stepped forward, running a hand across a crate's splintered wood, prying it open. Inside, the gold glowed faint under the dim light, bars and coins, wealth enough to build a kingdom. Yet the shine was marred. Scratches scarred the wood, crude markings etched by hands desperate to be remembered. Symbols, names, fragments of lives carved into the planks by those who had carried the weight until they broke. The cavern felt haunted, the air thick with the ghosts of the enslaved. The stranger closed the crate, jaw tight. This was not treasure. It was a graveyard. The tracker watched him closely, waiting. The stranger crouched by the fire pit left behind by guards, its ashes still warm. He picked up a charred stick, turning it between his fingers, then spoke, voice low. "This isn't gold. It's chains." The tracker did not answer in words, but his gaze was steady, his silence agreement. For a moment, the stranger considered the impossible. He could take enough to vanish, to cross the sea and live without want. The thought flickered, tempting, before he crushed it beneath the weight of what he had seen. Gold forgotten the lives that bled for it. If he carried it, it would carry him, and he would become another man like the Baron. He rose, dust falling from his coat. His voice hardened. It ended with him. The tracker nodded, as if the decision had always been known. That night, the stranger could not sleep. He sat with his rifle across his knees, the carved spear tip in his hand. The fire snapped, sparks rising like fleeting stars. He thought of the Baron's velvet smile, of the way the man had spoken as though power were his birthright. He thought of the gold, gleaming in the dark, silent as a tomb. His resolve settled like iron cooling. Morning came with pale light, creeping down the canyon walls. The stranger saddled his horse without a word. The tracker joined him, eyes set on the horizon where the Baron's ranch rose faint against the haze. Together they turned their mounts, leaving the hidden vault behind, the weight of its ghosts pressing their backs. The road stretched before them, long and unforgiving. They rode not for coin, not for survival, but for reckoning. And in the distance, the Baron was already waiting, his wealth and cruelty gathered like storm clouds. The stranger did not fear the storm. He had become it. Dawn bled across the sky, thin streaks of fire cutting to the lingering dark. The stranger rode at the head of a narrow line, the tracker beside him, their silhouettes sharp against the glow. The land was quiet, waiting, every blade of grass and twisted tree holding its breath. Ahead lay the Baron's ranch, a fortress wrapped in cruelty and gold. The stranger's rifle lay across his saddle as if it had grown there, steady and certain. His jaw was set, his eyes hollow with resolve. The ranch rose from the dust like a scar. High fences bristled with men, rifles glinting in the early light. Horses stamped behind the gates, restless with the scent of coming blood. From the upper windows, curtains twitched, watching. The Baron had prepared well. But wealth bred arrogance, and arrogance often forgot the measure of a determined man. The stranger dismounted, his boots sinking into the dust. He whispered something low to his horse, a farewell not meant for ears, but for the bond of miles they had shared. The tracker stood tall beside him, spear-tipped knife at his belt, eyes like stone. They had no illusions about what waited beyond the gates. Yet neither faltered. The first shot cracked from the rooftop, a warning more than an attack. Dust kicked at the stranger's boots. He did not flinch. He raised his rifle, sighted, and answered with thunder. The rooftop gunman crumpled, tumbling into the dirt below. The siege had begun. Chaos bloomed like wildfire. Men poured from the ranch house, their yells carried on the wind. Muzzles flashed. Smoke rolled thick, the sharp stink of gunpowder filling the air. Horses screamed as bullets found them. The tracker moved like a shadow, his knife striking in close where the rifle could not. The stranger fought with precision, each shot a sentence, each breath steady despite the storm. His world narrowed to targets and movement, the rhythm of survival. The battle swelled, desperate and violent. Men fell from balconies, crashing through railings, dust rising where they struck the earth. Windows shattered as defenders fired from within. The stranger pressed forward through it all, his steps measured, his rifle reloaded without thought. The tracker stayed near, their movements wordless, home by firelight trust. When the last of the hired guns broke and fled, silence fell heavy. The ranch yard was littered with the fallen, smoke curling from burning shutters. The stranger pushed open the doors of the house, the wood groaning under his hand. Inside, the air was rich with velvet and rot. Gold-framed portraits glared down, eyes of long-dead men staring in judgment. And there at the heart of it sat the Baron. He waited in an armchair, cane across his knees, a glass of brandy untouched at his side. His smile was smooth, almost tender, as though greeting an old friend. "You've done well," he said, voice soft, civilized against the backdrop of ruin. Few men could walk through fire in a merge hole. The stranger stepped further in, rifle raised, eyes never leaving him. The Baron leaned back, calm as a priest. "You think this ends with me?" he asked. "Gold waits for men like us. The land bends for those who take it. You could rule here with me gone. The gold could be yours. Say the word, and it's all behind you." The stranger's silence was answer enough. The Baron's smile cracked, revealing the steel beneath. His cane shifted, the silver tip gleaming as he angled it forward. In the breath of stillness, both men moved. The report thundered through the room, echoing off the walls. The Baron staggered, his fine coat blooming red. His cane clattered to the floor, pistol concealed within it still smoking. He looked at the stranger with wide, disbelieving eyes, as though wealth itself had betrayed him. Then he collapsed, body crumpling against a velvet armchair, brandy spilling across the floor like wasted blood. The house burned behind them. Flames licked the walls, swallowing portraits, devouring velvet curtains. Smoke poured from shattered windows, carrying with it the weight of centuries of greed. In the courtyard, the gold melted in the fire's embrace, coins and bars collapsing into formless ruin. The wealth the Baron had killed was reduced to glowing slag, unclaimed, unwanted. The tracker stood with the stranger as the blaze roared higher, painting the dawn in furious orange. Around them, those who had been bound by chains now stood free, their silhouettes strong against the flames. They did not look at the gold. They looked at the land, their land stretching endless into the horizon. The stranger mounted his horse once more. The tracker placed a hand against his shoulder in farewell, eyes speaking what words could not. The stranger nodded once, then turned his horse toward the open plains. He rode without haste, the fire shrinking behind him, the weight of choice riding with him like a second shadow. The carved spear tip rested in his pocket, heavier than gold, truer than coin. The wind rose, carrying the smoke away, leaving only the endless breath of the desert. His voice came low, as if spoken only to the land itself. "They'll say I forgot the gold, but gold forgets men quicker." The horizon swallowed him, his silhouette merging with dust and light. The plain stretched on, empty yet eternal, holding his figure until it was gone. What remained was not silence, but the echo of reckoning, carried on the wind.